Hi everyone! This Invention's motif, shown here in its original form, spans two bars, which I've labelled A and B. The motif is essentially symmetrical, constructed using a stepwise ascent and descent around the leap of a seventh, which is sometimes diminished, sometimes major, and sometimes minor. The motif's symmetrical section is preceded by a single 16th note, which is typically a harmony note, often the root note of the underlying chord. Beginning the work, for example, the initial D note sounding as the root note of tonic D minor harmony moves by step to this E, here a non-harmony note, beginning the motif's symmetrical section. In other instances, however, the motif's initial note leaps to the symmetrical section's first note, with both notes sounding as part of the underlying harmony. In this bar, for example, Bach uses a leap between F and D, the third and first degrees of D minor harmony. While the notes of the motif's A section, ascent, may typically be heard, as in the work's initial bar, belonging to a single harmony, the notes of which are connected by passing notes, occasionally Bach will use two chords against it. The initial entry of the original motif in the left hand, for example, which again sounds initially as tonic D minor harmony, here interacts vertically with the right hand figure, creating a fourth, which is not framed by other notes of the tonic's arpeggio. Here, therefore, we should probably hear these notes as sounding subdominant G minor harmony, an inclusion which is explicitly indicated in this bar. In the motif's original form, the concluding note of the A section's ascent and the initial note of the B section's descent are identical. Using compound melody, the motif's leap of a seventh against these identical notes creates a suspension, which is sometimes prepared as a harmony note, such as here, where the fifth of D minor harmony creates a 9/8 suspension with the left hand's G, or a non-harmony note, such as here, where the B flat is an incomplete upper neighbour note suffixed to D minor's fifth degree. Given the suspension's inclusion, therefore, the notes of this bar should probably be heard as A dominant seventh harmony instead of a C sharp leading note diminished seventh chord. The two bars of original motif then harmonically outline a tonic to dominant move, which occasionally also includes subdominant harmony. As we'll see, however, in different guises, the two bars may sound other chords. Bach begins this work as expected, with several entries of the original motif moving between the right and left hands. While two eighth note figures accompany these entries, they are not consistently used through the work, and even in these bars the second figure is varied. Bach, however, using invertible counterpoint, retains the first figure against the motif's ascent. From here, Bach uses an intervallic pattern, initially comprising this combination of motif and figures, and then this combination where these right-hand figures add sevenths to the underlying chords. The intervallic pattern leads the work into the relative major, which is confirmed by this perfect cadence in that key. Beneath this C-dominant pedal, Bach initially uses the original motif, now outlining the relevant notes of F major. He then begins the motif on A, but the underlying harmony may still be heard as moving between the tonic and dominant chords of F. By moving the entry's beginning note from F to A, Bach is able to outline part of an ascent through the first four notes of the F major scale. This scale ascent leads to this bar, where Bach introduces an inverted variant of the motif, which lacks the identical framing notes of the seventh leap. The lack of identical central notes allows more melodic flexibility, as the motif's ascent and descent may be horizontally staggered, incorporating relevant notes of the underlying chords. In these inverted variants, for example, the final note of the A section's descent is a second above the initial note of the B section's ascent, with both of these notes sounding as harmony notes. Here, for example, while the initial part of this bar should probably be heard as an F major chord, the second half sounds A minor harmony, forming part of a secondary 2/5 progression to F major's supertonic, with A minor's fifth degree moving to the root note of D dominant seventh harmony. And here the fifth degree of F major's supertonic moves to the root note of C dominant seventh harmony. These inverted variants interact vertically with this figure, the same one Bach used in these bars. As in the earlier bars, here the inverted variant and figure combination create an intervallic pattern which lead the work to A minor, the minor dominant of D minor. Here in the right hand, Bach uses the original motif outlining the relevant notes of A minor. Against this entry, however, the left hand's contour suggests F major harmony moving through D minor, sounding as the pivot into the key of A minor, to E dominant 7th harmony. Here then, harmonically, while the latter part of this entry moves as before from subdominant to dominant harmony in a single key, the initial chord sounds F major harmony instead of the expected A minor. While F major may be heard as the submediant of A minor, here, given it concludes not only the 2-5-1 cadence in F major, but also the 3-5 intervallic pattern, I prefer to hear it as the tonic of F major, moving to its submediant, which is also the pivot into A minor. After cadencing in A minor, Bach introduces a dominant pedal over which he uses these variant motifs. As with the earlier inverted variant, these also lack identical central notes. Unlike the earlier versions, however, the interval between the final note of the A section's ascent and the initial note of the B section's descent is larger, here spanning a third. Bach also uses the earlier variant, now itself inverted. While it's possible to determine a progression created by these variants interacting with the pedal, Bach appears to be simply beginning each one-bar segment of the motifs on successive degrees of the A melodic minor scale, beginning on C. This pattern leads the work back to an A minor chord and then onto a perfect cadence in that key. The original motif sounding against this cadence's tonic A minor chord, however, is melodically altered to include B flat, E flat, and an F sharp accidental. After the initial octave A notes sounding as the cadence's tonic A minor harmony, Bach treats the motif as outlining a 2-5 progression in G minor, which cadences onto F major's supertonic in bar 40. Over G minor supertonic harmony, Bach introduces the original motif, this time sounding as an entry in F major, but with the initial 16th note sounding as G minor's 3rd degree. This motif's ascent, like this ascent before, interacts using invertible counterpoint with this figure moving between the relevant harmony's 1st and 3rd degrees. The brief move back into F major comprises only a 2-5-1 cadence in that key. As with the move into A minor, here Bach treats the initial part of this bar as sounding F major harmony. The original motif beginning at this cadence, however, includes the accidentals of the D melodic minor scale, with the motif therefore beginning on F but sounding in D minor. The motif's suspension also resolves onto the note C sharp, perhaps suggesting Bach was hearing this as C sharp leading note diminished harmony and not as an A dominant 7th chord. The original motif, beginning on D, is then reintroduced in these bars, with Bach accompanying this entry with the same figures as he used earlier. Over the submediant chord of this interrupted cadence, he introduces another form of the inverted variant, which he also pairs initially with this figure, now inverted. The second bar of this inverted variant then leads to the work's final cadence. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.